The day my son left me at a nursing home, he didn't cry. He shook the administrator's hand, signed the papers he had already prepared, and told me he'd visit soon, the same way people say goodbye when they don't plan to come back. It was my birthday. I sat on that narrow bed for hours, wearing the sweater I bought just for that lunch, he promised. No cake, no candles, just a plastic wristband with my name spelled wrong. 1 month later, a clerk at a gas station stared at my ticket and whispered, "Sir, you might want to sit down." That was the moment everything changed, because my son thought he had buried me quietly. What he didn't know was that he'd just handed me the one thing he could never take back: time. And soon I would decide exactly how his story ended. I used to believe that if you loved your child enough, they would never abandon you. That belief carried me through 40 years of overtime shifts, through missed holidays, through an empty house after my wife died. I told myself it was worth it, that one day my son would look back and understand what I'd given up for him. On the morning of my 74th birthday, I still believed that. I woke up early, made coffee the way he liked it, and set 2 mugs on the table even though I lived alone. I put on my good sweater, the blue one that made me look less tired, and waited. When my son, Andrew, finally arrived, he smiled too quickly. He didn't come inside, just stood in the doorway, like he was already late for something else. "Let's go, Dad," he said. "I've got a surprise for you." I didn't hear the warning in his voice. I just grabbed my coat. During the drive, he talked about work, about stress, about how hard things had been for him lately. I listened, like I always had, nodding, making space for his problems. Then he turned off the main road. That was when I saw the sign. A long driveway, white letters, a place I had never asked to go. And in that moment, before the car even stopped, my heart understood what my mind wasn't ready to accept yet. Andrew didn't park right away. He sat there with the engine running, fingers tight around the steering wheel, staring straight ahead like he was rehearsing something in his head. I waited for him to laugh, to say this was some strange detour, that the real surprise was still coming. Instead, he exhaled slowly and said, "Dad, this is just temporary." That word landed wrong. Temporary is what people say when they want something to feel smaller than it really is. I asked him why we were here. He didn't answer directly. He talked about safety, about doctors, about how I'd been forgetting things lately. Things I knew damn well I hadn't forgotten. Then he got out of the car and opened the trunk. That's when I saw it. A brown suitcase. My suitcase. Packed neatly, labeled, ready. I remember thinking how strange it was that someone else knew which clothes I wore most often, which sweater I reached for when I was cold, which shoes hurt my feet but made me look presentable. "You went through my house," I said quietly. Andrew didn't deny it. He just sighed, like I was being difficult. Inside the building, everything felt rehearsed. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Papers already highlighted. My name printed everywhere, like this decision had been made long before my birthday. When the administrator asked if I understood why I was there, I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, something heavy settled in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just the cold realization that I was being removed from my own life, by the person I trusted most to protect it. The door closed behind Andrew with a soft click. No hug. No backward glance. Just the sound of a decision becoming permanent. A nurse guided me down a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. The lights were too bright, like the place didn't trust the dark. She spoke slowly, carefully, the way people do when they've already decided you're fragile. "This will be your room," she said. "One bed, one dresser, one narrow window facing a parking lot." I sat on the edge of the mattress with my coat still on, waiting for Andrew to come back and say there had been a mistake, that the papers were wrong, that he'd overreacted. He didn't. An hour passed, then 2. When I asked for my phone, the nurse smiled apologetically. "Your son asked us to hold on to it for now. Too much stimulation can be confusing." Confusing. That word again. That was when it hit me. This wasn't about my safety. This wasn't about care. This was about control. That night, I lay awake listening to my roommate breathe in uneven bursts, the television in the hallway playing some game show on repeat. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the past year in my mind. Every time Andrew said, "You already told me that, Dad." Every time he corrected me when I knew I was right. Every time he hinted that I wasn't as sharp as I used to be. I had believed him. And now I was here because of it. Somewhere between midnight and morning, something inside me shifted. I stopped waiting for Andrew to come back, and I started thinking about how I was going to leave. The next morning, I stopped trying to explain myself. That might sound small, but it wasn't. For days, maybe years, I had been quietly defending my own reality, correcting misunderstandings, proving I still remembered names, dates, conversations, trying to show my son, and now the staff, that I was still me. That morning I let it go. I ate breakfast in silence, oatmeal that tasted like nothing, coffee that had gone cold before I finished half of it. Around me, people stared at their plates or the television, waiting for time to pass. Time moves differently in places like that. No one is in a hurry. No one is expected anywhere. A nurse reminded me when lunch would be. Another asked if I knew what day it was. I answered correctly, and she smiled like I'd passed a small test. That smile stayed with me all afternoon, not because it was kind, but because it was practiced. That's when I understood something else. If I stayed quiet long enough, they wouldn't ask anymore. They would write notes, make assumptions, decide for me. Late that afternoon, I noticed a detail Andrew hadn't considered. My wallet was still in my coat pocket. Inside it was my ID, a few cards, and one folded slip of paper I'd carried for years with phone numbers written in my wife's handwriting. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I still existed outside those walls. That night, instead of lying awake in fear, I lay awake planning. Not escape yet, not revenge, just survival. And sometimes, that's how fighting back begins. On the fourth day, someone finally spoke to me like I was a person. Her name was Claire. She was a nurse filling in for another shift, younger than most of the staff, with tired eyes and a voice that didn't sound rehearsed. She checked my blood pressure without rushing, then paused longer than necessary. "You're not confused," she said quietly. I looked at her, unsure whether to answer. "In places like this, words can be used against you. I've worked here long enough to tell the difference," she continued. "You ask the right questions. You remember details. That matters." It was the first time anyone had said that to me out loud. Later that afternoon, she came back during her break and sat for a moment at the edge of my bed. Not to examine me, just to talk. She asked about my wife, about what I used to do for work. She listened, without interrupting, without correcting me. Before she left, she hesitated, then slipped something onto my nightstand. "A lottery ticket. I found it in the chapel," she said. "Someone left it behind weeks ago. No name. Thought maybe you'd like the distraction." I almost smiled. That night, I stared at that small piece of paper for a long time. It felt ridiculous, desperate, like hope disguised as chance. But when everything else has been taken from you, even something small can feel dangerous. I folded the ticket and tucked it into my wallet, next to my ID. I didn't believe it would change anything. I just didn't know yet that my life had already started turning, quietly, without asking my son for permission. I didn't check the ticket right away. For 2 days, it stayed folded in my wallet, like a secret I wasn't sure I deserved. Part of me was afraid that if I looked too closely, it would disappear. Another part of me didn't want one more disappointment. Hope can be cruel when you don't have room for it. On the third night, the common room was empty. The television was off, the hallway quiet, except for the soft squeak of a cart somewhere far away. I sat at one of the old computers, the kind that still hum when they wake up. My hands shook as I typed the numbers. I told myself I was just passing time, just proving to myself that nothing ever changes. The screen refreshed once, then again. I leaned closer. At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. I counted the numbers slowly, twice, then a third time. My chest tightened, not with excitement, but with something closer to fear. I matched every single one. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. I waited for someone to walk in and tell me there had been a mistake, that the system was down, that I'd misunderstood. No one came. When it finally sank in, I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel lucky. I felt exposed. Because if my son found out, if anyone here found out, I wouldn't just lose the money. I would lose my chance to leave. I printed the confirmation, folded it small, and pressed it flat against my chest for a moment before hiding it inside my shirt. That night, lying in that narrow bed, I understood something clearly for the first time since my birthday. This wasn't a miracle. It was a test, and I had one chance to pass it. The next morning, I didn't act like a man who had just won the lottery. I ate my breakfast, answered questions politely, let the nurse remind me about medication I didn't need. But inside, Every thought was moving fast. I watched who talked to who. I noticed which doors stayed locked and which ones didn't. I paid attention to the schedule taped beside the nurse's station, the times when the hallways went quiet, the moments when people assumed no one was paying attention. That was Andrew's mistake. He thought putting me here meant I would stop thinking. By the afternoon, I asked to speak to the social worker. Not urgently. Casually. I said I wanted to review my care plan. She smiled, pleased by my cooperation, and scheduled a meeting for later in the week. That bought me time. That evening, Claire found me sitting by the window. I didn't tell her about the money. I just asked a simple question. Do you know anyone who helps residents with legal paperwork? She didn't answer right away. Just studied my face, like she was deciding whether I was worth the risk. Then she nodded. There's a volunteer attorney who comes in twice a month. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because for the first time since my son walked away, I could see a path forward. Narrow, quiet, dangerous, if I stepped wrong. Andrew thought he had locked my life into a small room with pale walls. What he didn't realize was that he'd also locked me away with nothing but time to plan. The volunteer attorney arrived 3 days later. He was older than I expected, with a worn briefcase and the calm posture of someone who had seen panic before and didn't respect it. We sat in a small office with a door that didn't quite close all the way. I didn't start with the lottery. I started with the papers Andrew had signed. Power of attorney, medical authority, financial control, documents that looked clean on the surface but felt wrong the moment I touched them. The attorney read quietly, nodding once or twice, not surprised. When was the last time you signed anything willingly? He asked. I didn't, I said. That's the point. Only then did I slide the printed confirmation across the table. His eyebrows lifted not in excitement, but in understanding. We need to move carefully, he said. If your son learns about this before protections are in place, he can contest everything. That night, the plan began to take shape. A trust in my name, but not my control. A new will. A financial firewall Andrew couldn't cross. Most importantly, a legal exit. 2 mornings later, while the facility believed I was attending a routine assessment, I left through a side door with a borrowed coat and a duffel bag that wasn't mine. No alarms, no drama, just a quiet step into air that felt colder and freer than anything I'd breathed in weeks. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. Andrew thought abandoning me had ended my story. What he didn't know was that it had only moved it somewhere he couldn't reach. I didn't go far. That was intentional. I chose a small town where no one asked questions and routines mattered more than stories. I rented a modest place under the trust's name, paid in advance, and kept my head down. No internet at first, no television, just silence and time. That's when the digging started. At night, I spread old paperwork across the kitchen table. Bank statements, loan notices I never remembered signing, letters I had ignored because Andrew told me they were handled. Handled meant hidden. The patterns were subtle at first. Small withdrawals. Short-term loans closed quickly. Then bigger ones. Accounts opened, closed, reopened under slightly different terms. Always in my name. Always with signatures that looked like mine almost. My hands went cold as the truth settled in. Andrew hadn't panicked and dumped me in that facility on a whim. He had planned it. Every document I uncovered explained another piece. Why he insisted on managing my mail. Why he corrected me so often. Why he needed me to doubt myself. If I believed I was losing my mind, I wouldn't notice him emptying my life. I sat there until dawn, staring at a loan dated 6 months before my birthday. One I had never approved, one that would have come due soon. That was the moment anger finally arrived. Not loud, not explosive, cold, because now I knew something Andrew didn't. He hadn't abandoned a helpless old man. He had tried to erase a witness. And witnesses don't disappear quietly once they understand what they've seen. I created a fake social media account that same afternoon. I told myself it was just curiosity, just wanting to see what Andrew was telling people. But deep down, I already knew what I'd find. He had posted a photo of us from years ago. One of the last birthdays we'd actually celebrated together. His arm around my shoulders. Both of us smiling like nothing bad could ever reach us. The caption read, "Please help me find my father. He's confused and missing. We're very worried." The comments were full of sympathy. "You're such a good son. Praying for your family. He's lucky to have you." I stared at the screen until my jaw ached. Andrew wasn't just hiding what he'd done, he was rewriting it. That night, I called the attorney from a prepaid phone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rant. I just told him what I'd found. The forged loans. The timing. The post. There was a long pause on the line. "This changes things," he said finally. "If you want to stop him permanently, you need to document everything and stay invisible." That word again. Invisible. Andrew thought invisibility meant weakness. He didn't understand that it could also mean leverage. Over the next few days, I gathered every document I could. Copies, photos, records. I stored them in multiple places, physical and digital. If something happened to me, the truth wouldn't disappear with me. I wasn't ready to confront Andrew yet, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I was positioning myself, and the moment he decided to make his next move, I would be ready for it. Andrew made his move a week later, not with a phone call, not with an apology. With paperwork, a certified letter arrived at the small house I was renting. No return address, but I recognized the tone immediately. Cold, formal, confident. Inside was a court petition. Andrew was asking a judge to declare me mentally incapacitated. He claimed I was confused, unsafe, easily manipulated. He included statements from two people I barely knew, an old neighbor and one of his friends, both saying they'd noticed concerning behavior over the past year. I sat at the kitchen table, reading it slowly, carefully, making sure my hands didn't shake. This wasn't about concern. This was about erasing my voice. If he won, every decision I'd made since leaving the facility would be reversed. The trust, the money, my freedom, all of it handed right back to him under the excuse of care. For a moment, I felt something close to panic. Then I remembered something important. Andrew had built his case on a lie he believed too much. That I was still confused, still passive, still the man who would freeze instead of act. I wasn't that man anymore. I called my attorney and read him the petition word for word. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said calmly, "Good. This gives us jurisdiction." That was when I realized something. Andrew thought he was pulling me back into a cage. What he had really done was step directly into a courtroom where the truth mattered more than his performance. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on defense. Preparation became my routine. Not panic, not anger. Preparation. Every morning I woke up early and treated my mind like evidence. I wrote down the date, the weather, what I'd eaten the night before. I kept a journal not because I was afraid of forgetting, but because I wanted proof that I hadn't. Clarity documented is hard to dismiss. My attorney arranged for an independent psychiatric evaluation, not one chosen by Andrew, not one paid to agree with him. A woman with decades of experience and a reputation for being blunt. She spent 3 hours with me, asked about my childhood, my work, my marriage, my finances. She challenged me, interrupted me, circled back to see if my answers changed. They didn't. When she finally closed her notebook, she looked at me and said, "If you're confused, then the word has lost its meaning." I felt something loosen in my chest. We gathered everything else too. Bank records showing consistent decision-making, the trust documents, the timeline of Andrew's financial activity lining up perfectly with his sudden concern for my health. Each piece fit too cleanly to ignore. At night, I replayed memories of Andrew as a boy, teaching him to ride a bike, sitting in the emergency room when he broke his wrist, helping him study for exams I barely understood. I wondered when love turned into leverage. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Andrew thought he had time. What he didn't know was that while he was preparing to prove I was broken, I was preparing to show exactly who had been breaking things all along. The courthouse felt colder than the nursing home ever had. Not in temperature, in intoncion. Andrew was already there when I arrived, sitting at the front with his lawyer. He stood when he saw me, wearing the same concerned expression he used online. The one people trusted. The one I had trusted for years. "Dad," he said softly. Like this was a reunion. I didn't answer. When the judge called the case, Andrew's attorney spoke first. He talked about safety, about concern, about a son trying to protect his aging father from himself. He played short audio clips, old voicemails I'd left when I was stressed, edited just enough to make me sound scattered. I watched the judge's face carefully. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, not because I had to, but because I wanted the room to feel it. "My name is Thomas Reed," I said. I am 74 years old. I am not confused. I am not missing. And I am not anyone's property. I handed over the psychiatric report, the full one. Not excerpts, not summaries. The judge read quietly. Andrew shifted in his seat. I followed with bank records, timelines, and a simple explanation of how my son had taken control step by step while telling everyone it was for my own good. I didn't accuse him of crimes. I didn't need to. By the time I sat down, the room had changed. The judge looked at Andrew for a long moment and said, "We will reconvene in 2 weeks." Not dismissed, not decided, but delayed. And that delay told me everything. Andrew had come expecting to bury me. Instead, he'd just learned I could speak for myself, and people were listening. Andrew didn't wait for the next hearing. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he went back to doing what he did best, performing. Local news picked up the story. Headlines talked about a missing elderly father and a concerned son fighting for safety. I watched one interview from my living room. Andrew looked straight into the camera, voice steady, eyes damp. He said he was afraid I was being manipulated by unknown individuals, that he just wanted his father back, that he was worried I wasn't thinking clearly. People believed him. That used to hurt. Now it didn't, because while Andrew was talking, I was working. That same night, my attorney helped me send a sealed package to federal investigators. Not a complaint, not a plea, just documentation, loan records, forged signatures, timelines that showed motive and opportunity, lining up too perfectly to ignore. I didn't put my name on it. I didn't have to. If Andrew thought the court was the battlefield, he was already losing. Courts deal in arguments. Investigations deal in facts. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes. Andrew stopped posting updates as often. His tone shifted from confident to defensive. Comments online began to question his story. Why had I left so cleanly? Why did I have legal representation so quickly? Why did his concern only appear when money was involved? Andrew felt it. I knew he did. He had built his power on controlling the narrative. And slowly, quietly, that narrative was starting to slip out of his hands. The second hearing felt different the moment I walked into the room. Andrew didn't stand this time. He sat stiffly beside his lawyer, hands clasped too tightly, eyes darting toward the door like he was expecting someone else to walk in behind me, someone with answers he didn't have yet. We went first. My attorney spoke calmly, without drama. He summarized the psychiatric evaluation, the financial records, and the inconsistencies in Andrew's claims. No accusations, just facts, lined up cleanly, one after another. Then the judge asked Andrew's attorney a simple question. Can you explain why the petitioner sought full financial control shortly before placing his father into care? The silence stretched. Andrew's lawyer stumbled through an explanation about stress, misunderstanding, timing. None of it landed. When Andrew was asked to speak, he stood slowly. His voice wasn't steady this time. I was just trying to help, he said. My father isn't the same man he used to be. I looked at him then, not with anger, not with hatred, with clarity. I am the same man, I said quietly. I just stopped letting you speak for me. The judge leaned back, reading through the final document. His expression didn't change, but the room felt heavier with every second that passed. Finally, he spoke. This petition is dismissed. Just like that, my autonomy was restored. My finances released. My voice returned. Andrew didn't look at me as we gathered our papers. He was staring at his hands. And for the first time since my birthday, I knew something for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment Andrew realized he had lost control, and the consequences were about to find him. The call came 3 nights later. Not from Andrew, from my attorney. They've opened a formal investigation, he said. Federal. I didn't ask who they were. I already knew. I sat at my kitchen table long after the line went dead, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, staring at a spot on the wall where the paint was chipped. I expected to feel relief, vindication, something sharp and satisfying. Instead, I felt quiet. Andrew had always believed consequences were things that happened to other people. He'd spent his life fixing problems just long enough to avoid responsibility, paying one loan with another, explaining away one lie with a better one. This wasn't like that. Investigations don't care how convincing you sound. They don't care how worried you look on camera. They care about patterns, records, truth that doesn't move when you push it. Over the next week, the signs appeared. Andrew stopped calling mutual acquaintances. His social media went silent. A neighbor I used to know messaged me privately, asking if everything people were saying was true. I didn't answer. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. Late one night, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at a street that finally felt like mine. I thought about the man I'd been a month earlier sitting on a narrow bed, waiting for my son to come back. That man would never have imagined this moment. Not because he was weak, but because he still believed love protected you from harm. I understood something different now. Love doesn't protect you. Clarity does. And Andrew was about to learn how expensive it is to lose it. Andrew was arrested on a Tuesday morning. No sirens. No shouting. Just two men in dark jackets knocking on his door while the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. I didn't see it happen. I heard about it later, through a short message from my attorney that said only this: "It's moving faster than expected." The news broke by evening. Financial fraud. Identity misuse. Elder exploitation. My name wasn't mentioned at first, but people didn't need it spelled out. They remembered the story, the missing father, the court hearings, the concerned son whose concern had started to look expensive. Andrew didn't give interviews this time. His lawyer did. Careful statements. No admissions. Promises of cooperation. None of it mattered. Because once an investigation reaches that stage, the narrative stops belonging to you. I sat on my porch that night, listening to the wind move through the trees, thinking about the last time Andrew had hugged me, how normal it had felt, how little I'd suspected what he was capable of when pressure finally caught up with him. There was no satisfaction in knowing his life was unraveling, only a strange sense of symmetry. He had tried to make me disappear quietly. Now he was being erased publicly, not by me, but by the truth he thought he could outrun. That was the difference. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply stopped protecting him from himself. Andrew took the plea deal 2 months later. 10 years. That number sat strangely in my mind, not heavy, not light, just final. His lawyer said it was the best option. Too much evidence. Too many records. Too many lies stacked neatly on top of one another. I wasn't asked to testify. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for me. A week before sentencing, his attorney contacted mine. There was a letter Andrew wanted me to have. Handwritten, short. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sentence. "I know I ruined everything. I just didn't know how to stop." No excuse. No apology that asked for forgiveness. Just a confession that came too late to change anything. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not out of anger, but because some words don't need a response. On the day he was sentenced, I stayed home. I made coffee, watched the light move across the kitchen floor, lived a life that was mine again. People assume revenge is loud, that it ends with shouting, or victory, or satisfaction. It doesn't. It ends with distance, with the quiet understanding that the person who hurt you no longer has access to your life. Andrew lost his freedom that day, but long before that, he had already lost his place in mine. After Andrew was sentenced, people expected me to disappear again. Some thought I'd go quiet out of shame. Others assumed I'd move on and pretend none of it had happened. A few even reached out, gently suggesting forgiveness, as if it were a switch you could flip once justice had been served. They didn't understand. What happened between a parent and a child doesn't end cleanly. It settles. It changes shape. It becomes something you carry, whether you want to or not. I didn't forgive Andrew, but I didn't hate him either. Hate requires energy, and I had already given him more than enough of my life. Instead, I focused on what remained. I donated most of the money quietly, to legal aid groups that helped seniors who didn't have a lottery ticket, a lawyer, or time on their side. I funded counseling programs, education workshops, anything that made it harder for what happened to me to happen again. No press, no speeches, just work that mattered. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the man I used to be, the one who believed love alone was protection. I wished I could tell him what I know now. That trusting someone doesn't make you weak, but refusing to see the truth does. Andrew had taught me that lesson in the hardest way possible. And, as painful as it was, it made the rest of my life honest. On my 75th birthday, I sat alone on the porch of my small house and watched the sun go down. No candles, no party, no phone calls, and for the first time, that didn't hurt. I thought about the man I had been a year earlier waiting by the door in a clean sweater, believing that love was something you could earn by sacrificing enough of yourself. I wished I could sit beside him and say one thing: you don't have to disappear for someone to stay. Life didn't give me a second chance because I won the lottery. The money only gave me options. What saved me was deciding that my life still belonged to me even after someone tried to take it. I still think about Andrew sometimes. Not the man he became, but the boy he once was. Both of them are real. Accepting that is part of the peace. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to teach you where not to cross again. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if someone in your life has started speaking for you, deciding for you, slowly shrinking your world, pay attention. That quiet feeling in your chest isn't confusion. It's instinct. You're not too old to start over. You're not wrong for wanting dignity. And you're not alone, even when it feels that way. If this story made you think of someone, share it with them. Let them know they're seen. And if you want to tell me where you're listening from, or what this brought up for you, I read every comment. This was my story. Thank you for listening.